Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, I have to admit, when I first looked at the research for today's deep dive, I did a double take.
I can imagine.
I honestly thought we'd accidentally picked up a script for some old Cold War thriller.
I know exactly what you mean. The terminology is, let's say it's a little deceptive.
It really is. The title just sat there on the page, shadowing. And it just doesn't sound like a linguistic tool, does it?
Not at all.
It sounds like something you do in a beige trench coat, you know, trailing a suspect down some wet cobblestone street in Vienna.
Right, with the fog rolling in.
Exactly. I was fully prepared to talk about spycraft, surveillance, maybe a little bit of counterintelligence. I was ready for that whole noir atmosphere.
It definitely has that clandestine ring to it. But it's funny because if you're a spy, shadowing is all about being unseen, right?
Right, blending in.
Blending into the background. But if you're a language learner, which is what we are actually talking about today, it's the complete opposite. It's about finally being heard. It's about, stepping out of the shadows, so to speak.
And that is the pivot we are making today. We're setting aside the espionage.
For now.
And we're talking about what you could say is the most potent, but also maybe the most underutilized tool for anyone trying to really master a second language.
Yes.
And I don't mean just learning how to order a beer or, ask where the bathroom is. I'm talking about actual high-level mastery.
That is the key distinction. We are looking at a really fascinating discussion from the Learning English podcast with the hosts Emma and John.
Okay.
And the reason we flagged this one, out of the thousands of language learning resources out there, is that they aren't talking to the beginner.
That's an important point.
It is. They're not talking to the person who's, playing around on Duolingo for 5 minutes a day while waiting for the bus. They are talking to the advanced learner, the C2 level candidate.
Let's just clarify that for a second. C2? That's kind of a holy grail in language learning, isn't it? That's what the European framework calls native level proficiency.
It is. It's that level where you can function in a professional or, an academic environment without any real hindrance. But here's the tension, and it's something Emma and John identify right away.
Okay, what's that?
It's a tension that I think a lot of our listeners will recognize, even if they aren't quite at C2 yet. You can hit that high level on paper.
Right. You passed the test.
You pass the test. You can read complex literature. You can read The Great Gatsby or some dense academic journal.
Yeah.
And you can watch movies without subtitles, no problem. But then you open your mouth and you just hit a wall.
It's the phantom fluency problem. That's what I call it. The input is perfect, but the output is just lagging miles and miles behind.
Precisely. It's the gap between passive listening and active production. And in our modern world, that gap is actually getting wider.
Wider? How so?
Because of how much media we consume. Think about it. You can spend 10 hours a day with headphones on, listening to podcasts in your target language.
Yeah.
You feel so productive.
Oh, yeah. You feel like you're immersing yourself. You're living the language.
But you aren't actually doing anything. You're just a vessel. You're just letting the water pour in.
A vessel. That's a good way to put it.
And Emma and John argue that simply increasing the volume of that passive listening, having the radio on while you do the dishes or during your commute, it will never, ever bridge that gap to speaking fluency.
So more hours of listening won't fix it.
It helps your comprehension, absolutely, but it doesn't build the neural pathways you need for speech. You need a mechanism, a bridge, really, something to convert that input into muscle memory.
And that mechanism is shadowing.
That mechanism is shadowing.
Okay, so let's really get into the mechanics of this because I want to strip away the jargon. I want to understand what we are actually asking people to do here. Because when I hear shadowing in a learning context, my brain immediately goes back to high school Spanish class.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
The teacher plays a tape. It says, ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Then there's a pause. And the whole class just drones back, zombie style, ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Is that what we're talking about?
No.
Because if it is, I'm not sure we need a whole deep dive on it. We all know that drill.
And I'm so glad you brought that up because that is the single biggest misconception that stops people from even trying this technique.
Okay.
That high school drill, that's called chorusing or, listen and repeat. And the difference all comes down to the cognitive process that's happening in your brain.
How so?
In that listen and repeat model, the sequence is listen, process, stored in your short-term memory, wait for the pause, and then repeat.
So it's basically just a memory test.
It is. You're holding the audio in that little short-term memory loop, what psychologists call the phonological loop, for maybe 5 or 10 seconds, and then you're just regurgitating it.
Right.
And look, it has some value for memorizing vocabulary lists, sure. But it does almost nothing for fluency because you aren't training the flow of the language. Shadowing is completely different.
And the difference is the timing.
The difference is the element of time. Exactly.
So how tight is the timing we're talking about here? Are we talking a few seconds?
We're talking about a fraction of a second. You are not waiting for the sentence to finish, not even for a clause to finish.
So you're speaking at almost the same time.
You're acting as a simultaneous echo. As the speaker is producing a word, you are essentially right on top of them. Maybe a 200 millisecond delay. You are staying right on their heels.
Wow. That sounds incredibly stressful. I mean, just the idea of that, it makes me a little anxious.
It's cognitively exhausting. But that stress, that pressure, that's the point.
Okay, explain that.
When you do the old listen and repeat method, your brain has time to stop and analyze the grammar.
Right, you think about it.
You hear the sentence, you think, okay, that's the past perfect tense, third person singular, and then you say it. In shadowing, you bypass that analytical brain entirely.
You don't have time.
You have zero time to think about grammar rules. You are forced to plug your motor cortex directly into the audio stream.
So you're kind of surfing the wave of the sentence instead of looking at a map of the ocean.
That is a beautiful analogy. It's perfect.
Yeah.
You are surfing the wave. You are reacting in real time. And because you are surfing, you aren't just copying the words. You can't.
What else are you copying?
You are copying the physics of the sound. And this brings us to a concept that the source material spends a lot of time on. And it's absolutely vital for advanced learners. Prosody.
Prosody. Okay, that's a $10 word. Let's break that down for those of us who aren't linguists.
Prosody is, simply put, the music of a language.
The music.
Yeah. It's the rhythm, the stress patterns, the intonation, the melody. Every single language has its own unique musical signature.
And if you get that signature wrong?
If you get the words right but the music wrong, you don't sound like a native speaker. You sound like a robot. Or worse, you actually sound hard to understand, even if your grammar is perfect.
Can you give us an example of how that music differs between, say, English and another language?
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at English versus, say, French or Spanish. English is what linguists call a stress-timed language.
Stress-timed.
Which means we have a rhythm that relies on heavy beats. It goes da-da-da-da, like I went to the store to buy some bread.
Right.
The time between those stressed syllables is roughly equal, and we just crush all the little words in between. We barely pronounce to the or some.
Yeah, we don't say, I went to the store. We say, I went to this store. It just becomes one big blob of sound.
Exactly. It's a blob. Now, a language like French is syllable-timed.
Yeah.
It has a much more machine gun, staccato rhythm. Every syllable gets roughly equal time and weight.
Okay.
So if you take an English speaker and they learn perfect French vocabulary, perfect grammar, but they apply that English da-da-da-da prosody to it,
it's going to sound weird.
It's going to be almost unintelligible to a native French speaker. They're playing all the right notes, but they're playing them in the wrong time signature. They're playing jazz rhythms over a classical piece.
They end up sounding like a caricature of an English speaker trying to speak French.
Precisely. And shadowing forces you to abandon your native rhythm. You can't impose your own timing because you're desperately trying to keep up with the recording. You have to physically inhabit the rhythm of the target language.
The source material uses an analogy for this, right? Something about a musical instrument.
Yes, and it's such a great way to think about it. They talk about treating your mouth not as a tool for communication, but as a saxophone or a violin.
I love that image. It really shifts the focus from, intellectual understanding to physical performance. It's not about being smart. It's about being skilled.
And it is so physical. We forget this all the time. Speaking is a fine motor skill. You have dozens of muscles in your tongue, your lips, your jaw, your articulators.
Articulators.
And if you're, say, an American trying to speak Spanish, your tongue literally does not have the strength or the flexibility to roll the R correctly.
Because you've never used it that way before.
You have never been to the gym for that specific muscle. You have weak tongue muscles in that one particular configuration.
So shadowing is basically like taking your tongue to the gym. It's high-intensity interval training for your mouth.
That is exactly the comparison the source makes later on. It builds muscle memory. By shadowing at speed, you're forcing your tongue to make these crazy acrobatic maneuvers over and over and over again until it becomes automatic.
You're carving a new neural pathway for movement.
You're training the instrument.
But here's the thing about learning any new physical skill, and I think this is where a lot of adults just drop off.
Oh, yeah.
It feels weird. It feels incredibly awkward.
Oh, it feels terrible. There's absolutely no way around that.
I'm just imagining myself sitting in my home office, blinds drawn, headphones on, muttering along to some podcasts, stumbling over words, making these strange gargling noises. It just feels undignified.
Emma and John, in the source, they talk about this at length. They call it a humbling experience.
Humbling.
And I think humbling is a very polite, very British way of saying it makes you feel like a complete idiot.
Right. Because we're used to being competent adults. We pay our taxes, we do our jobs, we know how to order coffee, and suddenly we're in our room blabbering like a toddler. It feels regressive.
It is a direct assault on the ego, especially for that C2 learner we mentioned earlier.
Right, the advanced student.
The advanced student. You pride yourself on being good at the language. You have the certificate on the wall. But the moment you start shadowing, you realize you are slurring, you're missing words. Maybe you're even drooling a little bit because your mouth is moving faster than you can swallow. It is messy.
But the source argues that we have to lean into that mess, that the mess is actually the point.
You have to embrace the cringe. If you're comfortable, you are stagnating. The comfort zone is where fluency goes to die.
So the awkwardness is a sign that it's working.
It's a signal. It's a signal that you are pushing your processing speed and your articulators beyond their current capacity. That is the only place where growth happens.
It's just like lifting weights.
Yeah.
If you aren't straining, if the muscle isn't burning a little, you aren't building muscle.
Exactly.
So if you aren't tripping over your words when you're shadowing, you're probably not going fast enough or the material's too easy.
That's a great rule of thumb. If you sound perfect, speed up the audio or pick harder material. Because if you can do it perfectly, you aren't learning anything new. You're just performing something you already know.
Okay, speaking of material, this brings us to the curriculum. Let's say I'm sold on this. I'm ready to make a fool of myself in the privacy of my own home.
A brave choice.
What do I listen to? Do I just, pull up the top 40 charts on Spotify and try to sing along?
Please do not do that. The source actually has a very specific, and I thought it was quite funny, a very specific warning about that. They call it the Eminem warning.
The Eminem warning. I think I can guess what that is. I assume that means don't try to shadow rap god on your first day.
Or your first year, or maybe ever. Rap music is incredibly difficult for shadowing, and frankly, it's often counterproductive for the learner.
Why is that?
Well, first, the speed is often superhuman. It's not natural speech.
Mm-hmm.
Second, the rhythm is syncopated. It plays against the beat, which makes it really hard to predict where the sounds are going to land.
Okay.
And third, the amount of slang and poetic license means the grammar is often non-standard. So if you try to shadow Eminem, you will get frustrated and you'll quit in 30 seconds. I guarantee it.
It sounds like learning to drive by entering a Formula One race. You're just going to crash into the wall before you even get out of the pit lane.
Exactly. You don't need a race car. You need a sedan. You need something reliable, clear, and, articulate.
So what is the Honda Civic of shadowing materials? What's that reliable go-to?
TED Talks are the gold standard.
Ah, TED Talks. Why TED Talks specifically?
Well, just think about the context. A TED speaker has rehearsed that talk for months.
Right. It's polished.
It's incredibly polished. They're speaking clearly, they are projecting to an audience, and they're usually using standard, accessible language. It's what you'd call presentation style speech. It's dynamic, so it's not boring, but it's very controlled. The pacing is usually very deliberate.
Okay, that makes sense. What about audiobooks?
Audiobooks are fantastic, especially if you enjoy fiction. I mean, voice actors are professionals. Their entire job is clarity and enunciation.
True.
But the source also gives a big shout out to public radio. Specifically, they mention NPR in the United States.
Ah, yes, the NPR voice. Welcome to All Things Considered. It's very calm, very measured.
It's that driveway moment voice. It's rhythmic, it's standard English, and it's usually slow enough to follow, but still fast enough to be natural.
Okay, so TED Talks, audiobooks, NPR. But, and I feel like this is a big but, the source says you can't just rely on the audio alone.
You cannot. This is a critical point that they make.
You need the safety net. You need the transcript.
You absolutely need the text in front of you, at least at the beginning.
Now, I want to challenge this a little bit, because if the goal is to train my ears and my mouth, isn't looking at the text cheating?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Shouldn't I be forcing my ears to do all the work? If I'm just reading it, aren't I just reading aloud?
That's a really valid question. And if you were a native speaker just, practicing public speaking, maybe that would be true. But as a language learner, you have to operate under one core assumption.
And what's that?
Your ears are liars.
My ears are liars. Okay, explain that.
Your brain is a prediction machine. It absolutely hates uncertainty. So when you hear a stream of foreign sounds, your brain desperately tries to map them onto the words and patterns you already know.
It's trying to make sense of the noise.
Right. So you might think the speaker said, "I am going to the store," because that's the correct textbook version. But what they actually said acoustically was something more like, "Emma, go to the store."
Or like when people say "gee yet" instead of "did you eat yet?"
Exactly. That's a perfect example. If you don't have the transcript, your brain will auto-correct the audio. It will hear what it expects to hear, the textbook version. You will completely miss the reality of the sound. The source calls this process auditing. You listen, you shadow, and you look at the text. And the text highlights that discrepancy between what you thought you heard and what was actually said.
It exposes all the little shortcuts and blended sounds, the connected speech.
Yes. Connected speech is how words glue themselves together in reality. Native speakers are constantly reducing sounds. We drop vowels, we soften consonants, we don't speak like typewriters, we speak like rivers.
Woofy flow.
And shadowing with a transcript teaches you how to flow like that river. It shows you exactly where all the shortcuts are.
So the transcript is like the map that shows you where the hidden paths are in the forest.
Exactly. And once you start seeing those shortcuts, those reductions, that's when you start to break through the plateau.
The plateau, the absolute nemesis of every serious language learner.
It's the worst.
You cruise through the beginner phase, you struggle your way through intermediate, you finally get to advanced, and then you just stop improving. For like 3 years, it feels like you're treading water.
It's the okay plateau.
Yeah.
You're good enough to function. You can order the coffee. You can have the business meetings. Your brain just says, okay, job done. I don't need to burn any more calories on this.
It gets comfortable. So how does shadowing kick the brain off that ledge?
By using what the source calls forced processing. Think about passive listening again. If we're talking in a noisy bar and you miss every third word I say, you can probably still understand the gist of my story, right?
Sure. I use context clues. I fill in the blanks. I know you're talking about your vacation, so I can guess the missing words are probably beach or flight or something.
Your brain is incredible at filling in blanks. That's called top-down processing. You use your general knowledge of the world to guess the meaning.
Okay.
But in shadowing, you cannot guess. You can't skip anything. You are forced to articulate every single syllable, every article, every tiny preposition. You cannot skip the little words.
Because if I skip a word, I immediately fall behind. I lose the rhythm and the whole thing just falls apart.
Exactly. It forces you into bottom-up processing. You have to deal with the raw, unfiltered data of the language. And in doing that, it shines a giant spotlight on your weak spots.
How so?
If you keep stumbling over a specific vowel combination, or if you keep missing the word the or a, shadowing basically screams at you, here is the gap in your knowledge. Fix this.
So it's not just a practice tool, it's a diagnostic tool. It shows you exactly what you don't know yet.
It is brutal, unflinching honesty. And speaking of brutal honesty, we have to talk about the feedback loop.
Right.
Because just shadowing in a vacuum isn't quite enough. If you're actually doing it right, can't just trust how it feels.
And this leads us to the part of the source material that made me physically wince when I was reading it.
The recording.
Ugh, the recording. Why does the source insist that we record ourselves? Is it just to torture us? Because nobody likes the sound of their own voice.
It's true.
I host a podcast for a living, and I still don't like listening to myself.
It is a universal truth. But there's actually a physiological reason why you hate your voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When you speak, you hear your own voice primarily through bone conduction. The vibrations from your vocal cords travel through your skull directly to your inner ear.
Okay.
And that makes it sound deeper, richer, more resonant. In your own head, you sound like James Earl Jones.
And when you hear a recording?
You're hearing it through air conduction, the same way everyone else hears you. And it sounds thinner, higher, maybe a little more nasally. It sounds like a stranger.
But that stranger is the truth. That's what the world hears.
That is the truth. That's the data. So you have to record the shadowed session to get an objective look at that data.
Okay, so I record myself, then what?
Then, and this is the absolute most critical step, you play your recording side by side with the original audio.
The comparison.
The calibration. You listen to the NPR host say a single sentence. Pause. Then you listen to yourself say that same sentence, and you look for very specific differences.
Like what?
Like, okay, her pitch went up at the end of the question. My pitch stayed flat. Or she held that O sound for half a second longer than I did. I clipped it.
Or even, she sounded curious. I just sounded angry.
Yes. That emotional component is huge. You aren't just checking for, pronunciation errors. You are checking for effect, for the emotional tone.
This bridges perfectly to the next really big insight from Emma and John, which is that shadowing isn't just a mechanical drill.
No, it's not.
It's an acting class.
It is. And I think this frame shift is so helpful for people who feel shy or self-conscious about it. When you are shadowing, you aren't you. You're an actor playing a role.
You're trying on a new personality for a little while.
Yes, because language is so deeply tied to our identity. When we speak a foreign language, we often feel like a diminished version of ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. You feel less funny, less smart, less commanding.
You feel vulnerable. You feel like a child again.
So by adopting the persona of the speaker you're shadowing, you get to sort of borrow their confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For those 10 or 15 minutes, you aren't the struggling student. You are the confident TED speaker. You are the witty stand-up comedian. You try to mimic their posture, their tone, their energy.
It's a classic fake it till you make it strategy.
Ideally, yes. But it's actually deeper than just confidence. It's about learning cultural coding. And the source mentions this specifically in the context of American English.
Okay, what's the particular note on American English?
Americans, generally speaking, use a lot of tonal variety. We go up and down in pitch constantly to convey meaning, engagement, and friendliness. We are, you could say, loud and wide in our intonation. If you shadow a speaker who is very monotone, or if you speak English with a flat intonation because you're concentrating so hard on getting the grammar right, you don't just sound boring.
What do you sound like?
To an American ear, you might actually sound rude or disinterested.
That's a great point. There's a huge difference between saying, I am fine, in a flat monotone voice versus, oh, I'm fine, with that typical American melodic lilt.
The words are identical, but the meaning is completely different. The first one sounds like you're annoyed. The second one sounds friendly.
Right.
So by shadowing dynamic speakers, and comedians are fantastic for this, by the way, you learn the sound of engagement. You learn how sarcasm sounds in English. You learn how to tell a joke. Those are incredibly high-level skills.
I love the idea of shadowing a comedian. You're not just learning words, you're learning timing and delivery.
Exactly.
That's the real difference between just knowing the words and truly knowing the language. It's social fluency.
And it helps you build what some people call a language alter ego. A lot of polyglots talk about this phenomenon. They feel like a slightly different person in each language they speak.
Interesting.
Shadowing helps you consciously construct that person. You literally get to practice being English-speaking you in a safe environment.
Okay, so if we are constructing a person, we have to make a choice about accents. This is a question that comes up all the time.
Constantly.
English is a global language. Should I be trying to sound like I'm from London or New York or Sydney? Or should I just have a generic international school mix?
The accent strategy. Emma and John are very clear on this. You need to have a strategy. You can't just wing it and hope for the best.
So what's the rule of thumb?
It comes down to a clear distinction between your input and your output.
Okay, input versus output. Explain.
For your input,
Yeah.
so what you listen to in your daily life, you want maximum chaos. You want as much diversity as possible.
So listen to everything.
Everything. You need to train your ear to understand the Scottish taxi driver, the Texas bartender, the Indian tech support agent. Because if you only ever listen to the Queen's English from the BBC, you will be functionally deaf in the real world.
That's true. You can't go around asking the world to sanitize its accent just for you. You can't say, excuse me, can you please repeat that in standard broadcast American?
You can't. So your input has to be broad. But for your output, for what you practice in shadowing and what you aim for in your own speech, you need to pick a lane.
Why? Why not mix and match different accents? Isn't it cool to sound kind of global and worldly?
It might seem cool, but consistency creates clarity for your listener. If you use a very British vowel in one word, like pronouncing bath with a broad A, bath, and then in the very next word you use a hard, erotic American R, and then you throw in some Australian slang, it's disorienting. It adds cognitive load for the person listening to you.
It sounds like a patchwork quilt of sounds. It's distracting.
It's distracting. And it signals that you don't have full control over your instrument yet. It's actually better to have a strong, consistent accent, even if it's clearly a non-native one, than to have a confused mix of different native dialects.
So pick a model and stick with it for your practice. If you want to work in Silicon Valley, you should probably shadow American tech speakers.
Exactly.
If you want to study at Oxford, maybe shadow BBC presenters.
Precisely. Align your shadowing materials with your actual life goals. If you're planning to move to Boston, listen to people from Boston. Although, maybe don't start with the heavy Boston accent on day one. That's definitely advanced level.
Park the car in Harvard Yard. Yeah, shadowing that might require a whole separate deep dive.
It might indeed. Start with what they call general American first.
Okay, so let's zoom out here and look at the whole protocol. We've got the echo technique, the near simultaneous repetition.
Right.
We've got the curated materials, and we're definitely avoiding Eminem. We've got the transcripts as a safety net. We have the recording and feedback loop for calibration, and we've got the acting persona to help with the psychology of it. This sounds, well, it sounds intense.
It is intense.
This is not a learn in your sleep kind of method.
Not at all. And the source material uses one final analogy that I think is just perfect for summing it all up. They compare shadowing to HIIT.
HIIT, high intensity interval training, the workout style.
The workout style. This is not a long, slow jog.
So this isn't something you do for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon.
God, no. If you try to shadow for 2 hours, your brain will melt. It requires 100% of your focus. You cannot do it while you're also checking Instagram or answering emails.
It's single tasking.
It's the ultimate single tasking. And it's far better to do 15 minutes of focused, high-quality shadowing than 2 hours of zoned-out passive listening.
Quality over quantity. It's a sprint, not a marathon.
And just like any workout, consistency is the absolute key. You have to show up every day. You have to perform the reps, even when you don't feel like it.
But the payoff is worth it.
The payoff is fluency. It's speed. It's the ability to finally open your mouth and have the sentence just come out, fully formed, with the right rhythm and the right emotion, without having to stop and assemble it in your head first, like a piece of IKEA furniture.
That is the dream, to stop translating in your head and to just start speaking.
Shadowing builds the neural highways that make that dream possible.
Now, before we wrap up, I think we have to leave the listener with what might be the most practical and frankly the funniest piece of advice from the source.
Yes, the golden rule.
The subway rule.
Yes, the subway rule. This is vital public safety information. Do not, under any circumstances, practice shadowing on public transportation.
Please don't, unless you want an entire train car to slowly and silently back away from you.
Because think about it. Shadowing involves mumbling, maybe repeating the same phrase 5 times in a row, making exaggerated facial expressions to stretch those articulator muscles.
Yeah.
To any outside observer, you look like you're having a serious mental breakdown.
It is not a social activity. It is a solo sport to be performed in private.
Keep it to the living room, keep it to the shower, keep it to the car during your commute, but only if you're alone in the car.
Safe spaces only.
Safe spaces only.
So there you have it. The secret to cracking that C2 code, to breaking through that plateau, isn't another grammar book or another app.
No.
It's talking to yourself in a room, pretending to be a TED speaker, and learning to embrace the awkwardness.
It sounds completely crazy, but the science, and more importantly, the results, are absolutely undeniable.
I love it. So to our listeners, find a transcript. Find a speaker you admire, close the blinds, maybe lock the door, and start your echo. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are confronting a ghost.
A ghost. That is a very dramatic way to start the morning.
It is, but I think it's accurate. We're talking about that. That haunting feeling that's so familiar to almost every high-level language learner.
Okay, I know the one you mean.
Yeah, you know the type I'm talking about. We're talking about the C2 learner. The person who has, memorized the entire dictionary.
Crushes the grammar drills.
Absolutely. They can read the New York Times or the Economist without even blinking. But then they open their mouth.
And the ghost appears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The engine is running. The vocabulary is perfect. The grammar is flawless. But the music is wrong. It feels flat. It feels robotic. It's the uncanny valley of speech. You sound human. You sound correct. But something is just slightly off.
That's a perfect description. And that off feeling, that is where the plateau lives. Most people get to C1, advanced competency, and they just park the car.
Right.
They think, good enough, I can order a meal, I can write an email. But the research we're looking at today is for the people who aren't satisfied with good enough.
No.
It's for the people who want to bridge that gap between proficient and native.
And the bridge, according to this stack of research we have on the desk today, it isn't about learning more words.
Nope.
It isn't about memorizing another 100 phrasal verbs. It's about musicality.
Yeah.
Specifically, we are doing a deep dive into advanced shadowing techniques.
And we need to be very, very careful with that word shadowing, because in the language learning community, that term has been, well, it's been a bit abused.
It really has.
It's got a bit of a stigma attached to it.
It really does have a bad rap.
Yep.
People hear shadowing and they think of the parrot method.
Yeah.
You hear a phrase, you repeat the phrase.
Hear a phrase, repeat a phrase.
Yeah. It's mindless. It's boring. It feels like a punishment you got in elementary school.
Right. That's passive repetition. What we're discussing today is cognitive shadowing. This isn't just a drill for your mouth muscles. It's a rewiring project for your auditory processing center.
A rewiring project.
We're looking at sources that frame shadowing as a form of high-intensity interval training for the brain. It requires focus, intent, and a specific strategy.
We have got a really eclectic mix of sources today. I mean, we're looking at papers on prosody and linguistics, sure, but we're also looking at acting techniques involving Shakespeare.
Which is going to be fun.
Analysis of American sitcoms like Friends, and even the rhythmic structures of hip-hop.
It sounds like a mess when you list it out like that, but I promise there is a very strong thread connecting them all.
And that thread is overcoming the flatness.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into the tools, the Shakespeare and the rap music, we have to define the problem. Why does a learner who knows all the words still sound so flat? Why does that happen?
It comes down to the fundamental architecture of the language. This is the difference between what linguists call a stress-timed language and a syllable-timed language.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think a lot of our listeners might intuitively feel this difference, but they don't have the technical vocabulary for it. What does that actually mean?
Sure. So imagine a machine gun, rat-a-tat-tat-tat.
Okay.
Every bullet comes out at the exact same interval. That is a syllable-timed language. Spanish is a great example. French, largely, is syllable-timed.
Right.
Every syllable gets roughly the same duration and the same weight. It's a steady beat. If you were clapping along to it, it would be like a metronome.
Okay. So, la bicicleta. Every chunk is equal.
Precisely. Now, switch that in your head to American English. English is not a machine gun. English is, well, it's more like Morse code.
Morse code.
Or better yet, English is jazz. It relies entirely on peaks and valleys. We have what we call content words, nouns, verbs, adjectives that we stress really heavily, and then we have function words, prepositions, articles, auxiliary verbs that we absolutely crush into nothingness.
We just rush through them. We treat them like they're annoying obstacles in the way of the important words.
We don't just rush, we obscure them. I mean, we barely pronounce them. If I were speaking with a Spanish rhythm in English, I would say, I want to go to the store.
Very clear. Every syllable is perfect.
Exactly. It's precise. But a native speaker says, I want to go to the store. The to the becomes this tiny little blip between the big important words go and store.
So the flatness happens when a learner takes that machine gun rhythm from their native language, say Spanish or Japanese or something, and forces English words into that structure.
That's it exactly. You create what's called a monotone wall. And here's the cruel twist. The better your vocabulary is, the more confusing this is for a native listener.
Wait, how does that work?
Well, if you use C2 words, complex academic words, but you deliver them with the wrong rhythm, the native brain struggles to process where the emphasis is supposed to lie. It actually increases the cognitive load on the listener.
That is a huge insight. We usually think clarity comes from articulation, from enunciating every single letter. We're taught in school to speak clearly, but in English, over-enunciation actually reduces clarity.
It destroys the music.
Right.
And the music carries half the meaning. I mean, think about it. If you stress everything, you stress nothing.
Right.
And if you stress nothing, the listener doesn't know what's important. So our mission today is to unpack the toolkit for fixing this. And I warn you, these tools, they're a little unconventional.
Good.
We are going to make you feel a little silly.
I'm ready to look silly if it means I stop sounding like a GPS navigation system. Let's jump into the first tool.
Let's do it.
This first tool, arguably, scared me the most when I was reviewing the material. It's what's called the theatrical approach. Specifically, the source material discusses a listener question about using Shakespeare to learn modern English.
It does sound counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It sounds completely absurd. I mean, we're trying to teach modern, natural American English. Why on earth would we look at a guy writing in England 400 years ago?
Right.
If I walk into a Starbucks and ask, "Hath thou any oat milk?" I'm not getting coffee. I'm getting committed.
The taps. Please don't do that.
You're right, though. This is not about vocabulary acquisition. Let's be very clear. If you are using Shakespeare to learn words, You are doing it wrong. This is about prosody.
Prosody being the rhythm, the stress, and the intonation of speech.
Correct. And Shakespeare is the ultimate gem for prosody. You have to understand that Shakespeare wrote in verse specifically something called iambic pentameter.
Which brings back some not so fond memories of high school English class.
That is the heartbeat. 10 syllables, 5 heartbeats. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's this relentless, driving rhythm. It forces you to stress every second syllable.
Okay, but we don't speak in iambic pentameter today. Nobody talks like that at the grocery store.
We don't speak in strict verse, no. But the principle of alternating stress is the DNA of English. Shakespeare just exaggerated it. Think of it like resistance training.
Resistance training. Okay, like weightlifting. Exactly like weightlifting. If you want to be a sprinter, you don't just run. You squat heavy weights. You put your muscles under extreme tension so that when you actually run, it feels effortless. Shakespeare is the heavy squat rack for your mouth.
I love that image. So by forcing yourself to hit those hard stresses in Shakespeare, to be or not to be, you're training the muscles to punch the stressed words.
You are breaking the monotone habit by force. You physically cannot read a soliloquy in a flat voice. The text literally resists you. It demands that you go up and down in pitch, that you speed up and slow down.
It demands volume changes.
Volume changes, pitch shifts. It forces you to use your diaphragm.
So the idea is you practice this heightened, dramatic, over-the-top verse in the safety of your room. You push your voice to these extremes, and then when you switch back to normal, everyday English.
Normal conversation feels light as a feather. It feels easier. You've stretched your vocal range, so you aren't stuck in that narrow, robotic bandwidth anymore. You have access to more notes on the piano, so to speak.
It's all about capability. If you can handle the heavy lifting of a soliloquy, a chat about the weather it's nothing.
Precisely. Most learners are stuck playing only the middle C key on the piano. Shakespeare forces you to play the whole keyboard, and it addresses that physical aspect of speaking that we so often ignore.
What do you mean?
We treat language like it's just this mental exercise, just software running in the brain. But speaking is physical. It involves muscles, breath control, your vocal cords. You have to train those muscles to be flexible.
Okay, so we start with the heavy lifting of Shakespeare to break the monotone habit. But the source material pivots pretty quickly to the modern day. And this brings us to what I think is the core of musicality in American English, the emotional mechanics of pitch.
This is where it gets really, really interesting for the advanced learner, because once you've broken the monotone, you have to know how to use those pitch changes to convey meaning.
The source makes a really strong claim here. It says that in American English, pitch is almost as important as the words themselves.
I would argue that in some contexts, it's more important, because pitch conveys the subtext. It tells the listener how you feel about what you're saying.
Right.
And in a high context culture, which the U.S. can be in a lot of social situations, subtext is everything.
They gave a great example in the source called the Great Idea Experiment. I want to try this out with you to really demonstrate the difference for our listener.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so the phrase is just 4 words. That is a great idea. In version 1, I want you to say it with total sincerity. You actually think it's a good idea. Maybe I just suggested we order pizza.
Okay, easy. That's a great idea.
Okay, I heard the pitch go up on great. It peaked there, and then it slid down gently on idea. It sounded warm. It sounded, open.
Right.
Now, version 2, same 4 words. But this time, you're being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Maybe I just suggested we drive across the country on a tricycle.
Okay. Sarcasm mode engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great idea.
Laughs. Okay, that was completely different.
It changes everything. The words are identical. If you wrote them down on a piece of paper, they would look exactly the same. But the musicality, the pitch contour, flipped the meaning 180 degrees.
How did you do that?
In the second version, I probably dragged out the word great, maybe added a little vocal fry.
That sort of gravelly sound at the bottom of your voice.
Exactly. And I used a specific pitch pattern, kind of flat and low, that signals I am saying the opposite of what I mean.
And this is where the flatness problem just kills the advanced learner. Because if they say, that is a great idea, in a flat, robotic tone, the listener doesn't know if they're being sincere or sarcastic or just bored.
Exactly. The emotional data is missing, and that confuses the native listener. We rely on that data to navigate social interactions. If you get the pitch wrong, you might accidentally sound rude when you mean to be polite.
Or you might sound bored when you're actually excited.
Right. So to master this, the source suggests moving from the theater of Shakespeare to what it calls the sitcom laboratory, specifically mentioning shows like Friends and The Office.
The sitcom laboratory.
They're the perfect laboratory for this kind of thing.
Why sitcom specifically? Why not, say, the news or a documentary?
Because the news is designed to be neutral. A news anchor is trained not to show bias or extreme emotion. They flatten their effect intentionally. But a sitcom is pure, distilled, emotional interaction. It's people dating, fighting, joking, lying, apologizing. It covers the entire spectrum of human social friction.
And it's so dialogue heavy.
Extremely dialogue heavy. And it's fast. But the key insight from the source is that when you shadow a sitcom, you are decoding subtext. Sitcoms act as a kind of heightened reality. The emotions are slightly exaggerated for comedy, which actually makes them easier to hear and identify.
It's like looking at a cartoon instead of a photograph.
Yeah.
The features are outlined in black marker. You can clearly hear the pitch shift.
Precisely. When Ross on Friends is whining, he is really whining.
Yeah.
When Chandler is sarcastic, he is really sarcastic. It gives you a very clear target to aim for.
Right. And they broke down some specific mechanics of this in the notes. Right. They mentioned pitch direction at the end of sentences, the difference between falling intonation and rising intonation.
This is a golden rule for learners. Generally speaking, in American English, if you drop your pitch at the end of a sentence, it signals finality. It signals authority. I am done talking. This is a fact.
Okay, so like, I am going to the store. Drop at the end.
Perfect. That's a statement. But if you raise your pitch at the end, it signals uncertainty, or it signals a question. I am going to the store.
And suddenly you sound unsure, or like you're asking for permission or something.
Exactly. Now imagine a learner who has a habit of rising intonation at the end of every sentence. This is actually a common phenomenon called uptalk.
Right.
If you do that constantly, you sound perpetually unsure of yourself. You sound like you lack confidence.
My name's John. I'm from Chicago. I'm a nice guy.
Left.
Exactly. Undermines your authority. It sounds like you're seeking validation for every single thing you say. So shadowing characters in The Office or Friends helps you map these pitch patterns to the social context. You hear, Harvey Specter in Suits use a specific pitch when he's being authoritative, and you learn to mimic that drop.
You're basically stealing their confidence by stealing their pitch patterns.
You're trying on their audio skin.
Yeah, right.
And that is a really powerful way to learn.
But there is a catch, and the source material addresses this head-on. Sitcoms are fast.
So fast.
Characters talk over each other, they mumble, they use slang. It can be totally overwhelming.
It is the speed barrier.
Yeah.
And it stops a lot of learners in their tracks.
So the host in the source asks a really important question. Is it cheating to slow the audio down?
And I love the answer provided. It is absolutely not cheating. In fact, it's a necessary pedagogical step.
They call it the 0.75 ACK solution.
Right. Most players, YouTube, podcast apps, they all have speed controls. The advice is to drop the speed to 0.75x. What happens when you do that? Why is that specific speed so magical?
Because it's slow enough for you to hear the mechanics, but it's fast enough to maintain the natural flow. When you listen at full speed, your brain is just trying to catch the meaning. You're grabbing keywords, store, go, now. You miss the glue that holds the sentence together.
And this brings us to the concept of connected speech.
This is the secret sauce of sounding native. We don't speak like robots. We don't say, what are you doing? We say, what's it doing?
Let's look at that example the source gave. What a...
It's a total transformation. What plus R plus U. At full speed, the T in what changes.
It becomes a sort of soft E sound, right?
Yes, that's called a flap T. In American English, when a T falls between two vowel sounds, it gets lazy. It turns into a quick tap against the roof of the mouth. So water becomes water.
Butter becomes butter.
Butter becomes butter, and what are you becomes what are ya?
Okay.
Exactly. And the R basically disappears or becomes a schwa sound, that little sound, and U becomes yeah.
If you're listening at 1.0x speed, that just flies by. You might not even realize it's 3 words.
Exactly. But at 0.75x speed, you can hear the blend. You can actually hear how the tongue moves from the T sound to the ya sound. You can hear the elision where sounds are dropped and the assimilation where sounds blend together.
The source used an analogy I really liked here. They called it scaffolding.
It's the perfect metaphor. Think about how you learn to play a complicated guitar solo. You don't start at full tempo.
No, of course not.
You start slowly. You learn the finger positions. You build the muscle memory. Then you sped it up. Language is no different. Slowing the audio down is the scaffolding. You build the pronunciation structure at slow speed. You get your mouth used to making those connections. Then, once the muscle memory is there, you speed it back up.
You don't try to live in the scaffolding. You don't walk around talking in slow motion forever.
Labs. Please don't do that. That would be a different kind of problem. But you use it to build the competency. Once the structure is solid, once your tongue knows the path, you take the scaffolding down, you speed it back up to 1.0x, and suddenly you aren't thinking about it. Your mouth just does it.
It prevents you from stumbling. I think a lot of that flatness we talked about comes from hesitation. Learners are pausing to form the perfect word, and that just kills the rhythm.
Connected speech is the grease that keeps the engine moving. If you articulate every single word separately, the engine grinds to a halt. You sound choppy. Native speakers are lazy. We want to get from the beginning of the sentence to the end with as little effort as possible. We take shortcuts. You have to learn the shortcuts to sound like us.
Okay, so we have the what of shadowing Shakespeare in sitcoms, and we have the how using pitch and slowing down speed. Now I want to talk about the where, because the source material gets into the environmental factors of shadowing, and frankly, it's pretty hilarious.
It highlights the practical reality of doing this kind of training. It's weird. I mean, you're walking around talking to yourself in different voices.
They distinguish between active and passive shadowing. Let's break that down.
So active shadowing is what we've been discussing. You're sitting there, focused, maybe you have a script, you're rewinding, practicing pitch. It's a high cognitive load. You cannot do that while you're doing your taxes.
Right.
Can't do that while you're driving, or you'd crash.
No, definitely not. But then there's passive shadowing.
This is more for maintenance and rhythm. The source suggests doing this while you're doing mindless chores. Folding laundry.
Doing the dishes.
Doing the dishes, walking the dog. Things where your hands are busy, but your mind is relatively free.
So the idea is you're just kind of mumbling along, keeping the rhythm going.
Yeah, you're reinforcing the neural pathways without the intense strain of active study. It's like keeping the engine idling.
Yeah.
You're not stopping to analyze every vowel sound. You're just riding the wave of the language.
Mm-hmm. But then they warn about the social hazard. And the host and the source shared a story about walking the dog.
The crazy neighbor scenario.
I can just picture it. You're walking your dog, you're wearing headphones, you're listening to a scene from a movie where two people are having a screaming match.
Right.
You're shadowing it. So you're walking down the street shouting, "You can't handle the truth," or whatever.
And your neighbor is just watering their lawn and thinks you've completely lost your mind.
Or thinks you're screaming at your poor dog.
Exactly. But the serious point underneath the humor is that you have to be willing to look a little silly.
That is a big hurdle for adults, isn't it? We hate looking silly. We want to look composed and professional.
We do. But to learn a language, specifically to master the accent, you have to be playful. You have to be willing to make weird noises, pull faces, and sound ridiculous. If you're too inhibited, if you're too worried about looking cool, you will never push your voice to those new places. You have to embrace the crazy neighbor energy a little bit.
No, I'm not angry. I'm just practicing my fricatives. That's the line to use.
It's the perfect excuse. I mean, think of it as rehearsal. Actors rehearse, musicians rehearse. They make ugly sounds before they make beautiful ones. Shadowing is your rehearsal space. You have to be okay with the mess.
Okay, moving on to another tool in the box. And this one is the melodic method, using music.
Music is surprisingly effective, and it's often underutilized by serious learners who think they need to stick to serious materials like TED Talks or something. But music is a secret weapon for prosody.
The source mentions that singing locks you into a rhythm and a rhyme.
Think about it. When you speak, you can be lazy with your rhythm. You can pause wherever you want. You can slow down to think.
Yeah.
But when you sing along to a track, the rhythm is non-negotiable.
Right.
The beat is the boss. You have to fit the words into the measure.
It forces speed and linking.
Completely. You cannot sing a pop song fluently without using connected speech. The melody forces you to link the end of one word to the beginning of the next. It is the ultimate drill for fluency because if you stumble, you fall off the beat.
The source specifically mentions two genres that are on opposite ends of the spectrum, rap and ballads.
Right. Two different tools for two different jobs.
Let's look at rap first. This seems like the extreme sport version of shadowing.
It is. Rap is high-intensity interval training for your mouth. It requires incredibly precise articulation at very, very high speeds. It uses complex rhyme schemes and internal rhythms. If you can shadow a rap verse, even a slow one everyday conversation will feel like it is in slow motion. It builds articulatory agility.
And what about ballads on the other end?
Ballads are usually slower, with long held notes. This is great for vowel sounds. American English has some notoriously difficult vowels diphthongs that slide from one sound to another.
Like the word no. It's not just one sound.
Right. It's not oh, it's no.
Yeah.
It slides. In a ballad, you hold that note. You have to sustain the vowel. It acts like a microscope for your pronunciation. You learn to feel the vibration in your chest, not just your throat.
Plus, there's the earworm effect.
Oh, yeah. We've all experienced this. You hear a song once and the chorus is stuck in your head for 3 days. You just can't get it out.
How does that help with learning?
It aids retention. I mean, a dialogue from a textbook usually fades from your memory in minutes, but lyrics, they linger. The melody acts as a hook that drags the language into your long-term memory. You find yourself humming grammar structures in the shower. It's involuntary review.
That is powerful. So we have all these tools. But as we get toward the end of the source material, a really crucial question comes up, and it's all about identity.
The identity crisis of the advanced learner.
The host asks, with so many global dialects, Scottish, Southern U.S., Australian, Cockney, General American, what should a learner mimic? English is not one thing, it's a hydra.
It's the dialect dilemma. The world of English is vast. You have the Texas oil tycoon, the London banker, the Australian surfer, the Canadian hockey player. They all speak English, but they sound completely different.
And the expert in the source provides a very nuanced answer. They distinguish between comprehension and production.
This is the key. For comprehension, your input strategy, you want maximum diversity. You want to expose your ears to everything. You want to be able to understand the Scottish taxi driver and the Texan bartender. If you only listen to one type of English, you'll be lost in the real world. Diversity is strength and comprehension.
So widen the funnel for input. Just listen to everything.
Yes. But for production, for what comes out of your mouth, you need a different strategy. You need to be a sniper. You need to pick a target model.
Why? Why can't I just mix and match what I like from each?
This leads us to the most vivid metaphor in the entire source. The linguistic Frankenstein.
I love this image.
It's terrifying and it's accurate. Imagine a monster stitched together from different body parts. Now imagine an accent stitched together from different sources.
So you have a learner who watches Peaky Blinders, so they have a bit of a Birmingham accent. They listen to Drake, so they have some Toronto American rhythm, and they study a textbook that came from Oxford.
And the result is chaotic. They might say water with a hard British T, but schedule with an American Nesky sound. It creates this patchwork accent.
And the problem is, it confuses the listener.
Exactly. Our brains use accents to categorize people, to understand where they're from. We're trying to place you. Where are you from? When the signals are mixed, when it's a Frankenstein monster of accents, it's distracting. It takes focus away from what you're saying because the listener is too busy trying to figure out how you are saying it.
So the advice is, pick a lane.
Pick a lane. If you want to sound General American, shadow only General American speakers. Consistency is key for your identity as a speaker. You want to sound like one coherent person, not a committee of people from around the globe.
That is really strategic advice. It's about curating your own voice. You treat your voice like a brand.
Exactly. You are the curator of your own accent. You reject the inputs that don't match your target.
So looking back at this roadmap, wow. We have covered a lot of ground.
We have. It's a journey from, mechanics to art.
We started with the problem, the flatness caused by the stress-time nature of English.
And we offered the solution of Shakespeare as resistance training to break that monotone.
We moved to the sitcom laboratory, using shows like Friends to master pitch, subtext, and sarcasm.
Remember the great idea experiment. Pitch changes meaning.
We talked about the mechanics of speed using 0.75x speed as scaffolding to hear connected speech like wadaya.
And we discussed the environment active study versus passive chore shadowing and the danger of getting the crazy neighbor look.
We touched on the power of music rap for agility, ballads for vowels, and that earworm effect for memory.
And finally, the importance of avoiding the linguistic Frankenstein by choosing a consistent target model.
It's a really comprehensive toolkit. But what I love about this deep dive is the underlying philosophy. The source material ends with a really provocative thought.
Don't just let the English wash over you. Grab it, repeat it, and make it your own.
That's the shift, isn't it? It's moving from being a passive recipient of the language to an active shaper of it.
It is about ownership. Most learners treat language like a warm bath. They just sit in it and hope it soaks in. Shadowing is getting out of the bath and doing laps in the pool. When you shadow effectively, you aren't just quoting someone, you are inhabiting them. You are saying, I can make this sound belongs to me now.
It's physical, it's musical, and yeah, it is a little bit theatrical.
And that's okay, because language is a performance. Every time we speak, we are performing our thoughts.
So here is our challenge to you, the listener. Find your target model. Maybe it's a character from a show, maybe it's a podcast host, maybe it's a musician.
Pick someone whose voice resonates with you, someone you want to sound like. Do you want to sound intellectual and soft-spoken? Do you want to sound energetic and punchy? Be specific about it.
And start your resistance training.
Yeah.
Do the heavy lifting. Be the crazy neighbor walking the dog and muttering lines from a movie.
Embrace the awkwardness. The awkwardness is where the growth happens.
Master the music, and the fluency will follow. That wraps up our deep dive into the musicality of English.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Go make some noise.
See you next time.